in the Social Security Trust Fund in order to prepare for that. So that's what we've done, and that surplus will tide us over until about 2035 when we will have a problem. So I'm not denying the existence of a problem for the next generation, but that's not our problem at the moment. The one that the one we have is healthcare. Healthcare costs are going to grow explosively as a result of that same aging of the population, and we haven't built up a trust fund to deal with that problem. So we don't have time for me to talk about healthcare reform. My wife manages my investments, and she's also a medical doctor, and I'm under strict instructions not to pontificate about healthcare. It's too complicated, I've been told, for economists. But what I would say, I meant that in all seriousness. What I would say is that the non-defense, non-entitlement, so-called discretionary portion of the budget is too small for cuts of any magnitude to make a significant dent in the problem. So we in the United States raise 19% of our national income in federal taxes in good times, in a normal year. That is less than any other civilized country, and any other OECD economy. So I would submit that if we're serious about national defense, health care, Social Security for retirees, rebuilding our infrastructure, maintaining our education system, we will have to raise more revenue. And I haven't heard a politician seriously acknowledge that point. It's not on the table for 2011, so far as I can tell. We know it's political suicide, in quotes, to talk about raising taxes in an election year. So that makes me seriously worried about getting to 2013.
My question is about the healthcare system, too. Bill Moyers had a number of doctors back in, I believe it was April 22nd of 2009, and they said that the current system will eventually go broke, and that the only possible solution is the single-payer system. My question to you is, and one other thing, Howard Dean also pointed out that a lot of the CEOs for the private healthcare providers, their average salary is something like $8 million. That means some get much more, some get less. With the margin of money going to the management of these systems, and I think Johns Hopkins said they have to deal with 70 different companies. Johns Hopkins University Hospital have to deal with 70 different companies. With all the costs for management, is the system going to self-correct with eventual changes in legislation, or are we headed for a bankruptcy as the doctors predict?
My book is about the dollar, and often in these kind of talks I get asked about what will happen to the price of gold, but I guess it's fair game to ask me about healthcare as well. I'm tired this evening because my wife, the doctor, got home only at midnight last night dealing with insurance companies. So I have some appreciation for the problems that you describe. The costs of operating our medical system are very high. And I think the experience of other countries, France is one many people point to as having a healthcare system that can deliver outcomes comparable to ours at half the cost, suggests that some kind of quasi-single-payer system, maybe with limited amounts of competition, would be desirable, that getting people out of the emergency room and getting them preventive care would ultimately save costs. So I think it can be better, can be done better. You know, medical care, and again, I'm under instructions not to pontificate about this, is something that is an example of an activity where the market does not work. For a market to work, you need supply curves that slope up and demand curves that slope down. And demand curves for healthcare don't slope down. When the cost of getting a treatment is higher, you don't ask for less. You want that darn treatment. For a market to work, people have to be well informed. And, you know, healthcare is a classic example of a market where information is incomplete and asymmetric. So, you know, people in this country are rightly worried that a government-run healthcare system wouldn't operate well. A market-run healthcare system doesn't operate well either, and I think we need to think seriously about that.
One segment of our economy that doesn't seem to be contributing what it might is the banking system. And I wonder what you think about the large amount that many heads of banks are receiving in terms of salary, remuneration, whatever, and yet don't seem to be really coming to grips with any of the problems that they could really do something about. I'm talking about the fact that so many people have lost houses, etc., plus other aspects of our society. And it seems to me that there is a lot of money there that could be well utilized and is not at the present time.
It's the now mayor-elect of Chicago who said a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And I think we wasted the crisis, which was an opportunity to fix a broken banking and financial system, that we suddenly became aware in 2008 that our system was broken, that people in the financial system had incentives to take on excessive risk. The compensation practices encouraged that kind of gambling because heads I win, tails you lose. That financial institutions were too big to fail, and they took risks accordingly because they knew they would get financial assistance if something went wrong. So we now have the Dodd-Frank Financial Reform Act of 2010 that fixes a few of these problems a little bit on the margin, but I think the fundamental problems are still there, and the kind of behavior that gave rise to the financial crisis through which we've been through could very well recur, and that is disturbing and alarming. I think it is a disappointment.
Since we moved off the gold and silver standard and gone to the point where the government can print all the money it wants, do you see a future world currency which would be like an electronic currency where there would be a World Bank and there would be a fair accounting practices for all trade?
Would there be a global electronic currency and a global central bank called PayPal? I do think that changes in technology enable people to do transactions in a variety of ways that don't involve currencies issued by sovereign states. So the creation of liquidity and the financing of transactions, which for a long time now has been the exclusive preserve of sovereign national governments and their designated agents, the central bank. There are a growing number of other ways of doing some of those transactions. I think the governments have an advantage in this competition. They write the laws and they can say things like, you need dollars in order to pay your taxes. So I think there are a variety of reasons why national currencies are here to stay. But I agree with the implication of your point that if the stewards of those national currencies mismanage those currencies and ignore their obligations, people will look around for other ways of doing that same business. That's why people have been attracted to gold recently as a store of value, and why they're looking around for other electronic means of doing other real and financial business. So I'm not predicting, but I can see a scenario.
So today's Financial Times on the front page, they have a headlined article which says that China owns more treasury bills than previously thought, but the headline really should be, what I read in there is very alarming, is that actually the Fed owns more treasury bills than the Chinese government. Any comments?
So the question is about Fed policy, and really about this thing we call QE2. Since November, the Fed has been engaged in another round of quantitative easing, which means buying treasury bills, treasury bonds, for cash, trying to put more cash into the banks so that the banks turn around and lend more of the liquidity that they possess. I think that is the right thing for the Fed to have been doing in a situation where the U.S. economy was growing slowly, as it was late last year, and when unemployment was still close to 10%, when there was very little sign that it would translate into inflation anytime soon. Circumstances have changed since the beginning of 2011. So we had this deal to extend the Bush tax cuts and to reduce payroll taxes in 2011, which put more money in people's pockets. People have been spending more, and the economy is growing faster. There are the beginnings of worries about inflation now. What with the economy growing faster, higher oil prices, higher food prices globally. So it's not as clear to me that the Fed should continue doing what it has been doing. Am I worried by the current situation that the Fed has bought so many U.S. Treasury bonds? No. I think that was appropriate given the depressed state of the economy. Would I begin to worry if the Fed continued to do the same? Yes, I probably would.
So just a quick one. Do you see political liberalization as sort of a prerequisite to the renminbi emerging as a reserve currency? Or do you think they could just keep going with this same sort of totalitarian at the top and then community boards?
More generally, I think what China will have to do is to, as I said before, establish rule of law, convince investors and others that contracts are really worth the paper that they are written on. And I think more generally that rule of law will eventually have to extend into other domains as well. I also think that Chinese officials are aware of that they are very, very aware of what's been going on in North Africa and the Middle East, whether they can meet that challenge and move toward some kind of more open political system smoothly or not. Who is to say? As Chairman Mao said, it's too early to tell.
In the political conversation, very seldom we hear about the productivity of the public sector as one of the elements, to some extent, to mimic the productivity increase that we have seen in the private sector for the last decades, and with the introduction of all the new technologies. Can you comment on that? Because that is what a key lever in terms of restoring the prosperity of the country.
So the question is about the productivity of the public sector. And while this is probably less important in the United States than in other advanced economies because our public sector is smaller, it still is important for the reasons you describe. So you'll remember 10 years ago, the IRS was terribly unproductive because they had ancient computers. They invested in newer computers, and they can do their business more efficiently and be more productive. So I worry in part that if we starve the public sector of resources, it is not going to be able to increase its productivity. So we have a Securities and Exchange Commission that is supposed to oversee the operation of financial markets and institutions, but is having its budget cut by what, 40% under the House plan at the moment. I'm not sure that without investing in the public sector, we can raise its productivity. So, you know, part of the subtext of your question is whether we have to break public sector unions in order to get the public sector workforce to work harder. I would submit we also have to, or more importantly, the priority would be on investing in systems and in people in order to make the public sector more productive. So the financial problem that was alluded to before, part of that results from the fact that the best people go to the private sector, where they are lavishly and sometimes excessively compensated, and any bank inspectors in the audience will forgive me, the people who are left go to the public sector. So everyone refers to the bloodhounds and the greyhounds problem of financial regulation, that the bloodhounds in the private sector are well-fed and they run very fast, and the bloodhounds can't keep on their trail. I think part of this problem will be to invest in the public sector.
Well, we have made you roam wide, and I hope your wife was not listening in to the Medicare part of it, because the book is about the dollar. The dollar. It's a wonderful read. If you can believe me, it's a wonderful read. We're coming to that point in the evening where we give you a break, but before we do that, we want to tell you we have many upcoming programs that are simply great. Just this coming Thursday, we have the brilliant woman from the Young coming here to explain to us one of the great civilizations that actually rose without the dollar and functioned for hundreds of years without the dollar, the great Mesoamerican civilization of the Olmecs. And she's coming with a visual presentation, so you'll get to see what they kept in their treasury, which was jade and gold and silver. And they gave us the first attempt in the Americas to build a magnificent civilization. So hopefully you can join us on Thursday. Then my colleague and friend, Angelina Hiye, our director, is bringing us a wonderful program. It will be a Chinese composer who has put to music a major 20th century tragedy, which was, of course, the rape of Nanking. His music is, I have not heard it yet, but Angelina tells me it's quite wonderful. He will be here himself. He will tell us, and then he will perform, so that you have a chance to catch hold of the Chinese mindset as it looks back historically at one of the most tragic moments during World War II, the rape of Nanking. And we have many other things also. I don't want to hold you away from the wine and cheese, so just know that if you put your name into that fishbowl with your email, you will get an email from us for the rest of your life, because we want you to come here and enjoy the intellectual stimulation offered by the Center for the Pacific Rim. Please join me in thanking Barry for crossing that bridge.